Do we call you JC on these videos or James? JC? James?
I'm called JC, and I'm
James.
I'm James Casey.
Okay.
Just
call you JC.
Yeah,
Make
you
it
can
more
call
natural.
me JC. Yeah.
Hey, it's James from Active here with JC, our lead designer, and we're here to talk about how we got from the 2.0 to the 2.3 and how we designed product and what kind of led to the design and function of the 2.3, kind of deep dive into all of those details. So what did we learn from the Active 2.0 and what was the need for the 2.3? Well, I can speak to that from a couple different points of view. So the Active 2.0, we had received some good reception in the market, but immediately we got some feedback and questions and challenges and criticisms around areas such as, well, you guys are using a universal motor. We'd rather prefer to have an induction motor. Your product is not rebuildable, or you can't fix it. That's not good. Or just, we wanted more performance. And I think for ourselves, how were we able, or how would we evolve the product? So the motor, first and foremost, in the 2.0 is a universal motor, and that turned out to be a limiting factor in terms of the performance of the product. So I think we started there. Changing to an induction motor would do a couple of things as well. The lifespan of an induction motor typically is much longer than a universal motor, and it is also somewhat serviceable. So you can get a much longer runtime from an induction motor. And as some of our viewers know, kind of longer runtime, longer life cycle is part of the Active brand, is part of what we designed the pump for. So that was a big part of it. The other part, again, addressing all these points that we got from the consumer, was how do we make the pump rebuildable? So we looked at the pump design, looked at the kind of returns and some of the criticisms we got from the 2.0, and really set about going, okay, how do we design this product in a way so that we can make it somewhat rebuildable? And along that way, when we're looking at defects and returns of the 2.0, in addition to wanting to increase the performance, we obviously went to a change in the pump head material, going from aluminum to brass, which again had its own kind of quality improvements and made it less prone to cracking. Obviously, with a bit more pressure and flow in the 2.3, that's something we absolutely wanted to avoid. And so through that kind of progression of modifying and upgrading and kind of changing all of these components, in addition to the motor, really focused on kind of that feedback we got from the market, rebuildable, wanting an induction motor, having a longer life cycle, and of course, ultimately better performance. Those were kind of the technical characteristics that kind of then defined the next stage of the product, which was really kind of the design. So, again, looking very closely at all the weak points of pressure washers, data that we gleaned from both, not just the 2.0 and feedback, but don't forget, we sell hundreds of thousands of pressure washers a year under different brands, through different markets. So we have a lot of data around how customers are using and weak points of the product. Now, I will say, the average user of the Active pressure washer is using their pressure washer in different ways than, call it, the typical Walmart or Home Depot buyer might be using their pressure washer. And so, we really had to learn some of those things and take those into consideration when upgrading and improving some of the components. So, as an example, we upgraded the micro switch and the unloader and bypass valves. Those were critical to do because we found people were using 50, 75, 100-foot hoses of different materials, and how that was impacting the overall system pressure in the pump, causing stop and start issues and so forth. And again, typically you don't see any of these problems when you're building for a Walmart or a Home Depot, because that customer typically will not use that type of accessory on their product. As I mentioned, the pumps and the seals and valves of the pumps, how do you upgrade those for longer life? How do you make sure that they are replaceable? How do you make sure that they can sustain the higher flow and the pressure? And then of course, how this all mates together with the more powerful induction motor. So again, a lot of detail work and engineering behind the scenes to deliver the 2.3. How did we get to where the design is today?
Well, I think actually we need to go back a little
Okay.
bit further
Sure.
because in a way, I think the 2.0 was kind of a victim of its own success in that we were delivering performance that it was kind of unheard of at the price points and all that we were produced. And so the enthusiasts took it on, but then also the mobile detailers, the commercial guys started doing it, and then they started saying, well, wait a second, we want this performance, but look, if I use this for 200 hours a week, or not 200 hours a week,
that's
you know what I'm saying?
That was a kind of a good and bad gray area, right? Because obviously our product at the price point, the way it was designed, was really more for like call it a home, prosumer, whatever you call it, application. But obviously there were many, many users who were attracted to the performance and the form factor that were using it in commercial setups, right? And they were running through these machines and using it for hundreds and hundreds of hours. And that's great for a DIY machine, but not so great for an industrial commercial machine.
That's right. So that kind of really gave us the reason why, like what. Then we just started looking at every single detail of first with the returns, and then just looking internally and saying, this could be better. If we expect people to pay more for it, we need to deliver much more.
Right.
And it was always kind of running that index of it's going to cost more, so we better really deliver.
True. Yeah. That's right. Let's dive into what the design process was like for the 2.3. And again, obviously it's similar to most products that we design, whether it's for our own brand or for other brands. We like to focus on what the function is. We like to integrate kind of feedback, what it's going to be used for, kind of tips and tricks from the market that we see and we hear about. And then last but not least, how do we integrate aesthetics into the design solution, whether that's our own brand aesthetics or brands that we build for.
Sure, yeah, so the first thing we knew, which we learned in the 2.0, we were looking much more at a bare bones tool. We knew we didn't have to worry about hose reels and cord storage and all of that. But there were certain things that we definitely wanted to include. A handy place for the nozzles, a wall mount. Many people were putting the 2.0 on a shelf, and we thought, imagine we had built that in from the start, that it had a natural wall mount built into it. So that was something that we really, it was very high on the list of the integration function of the product.
Going from a universal motor to an induction motor, from a functionality point of view, one of the things that people don't know, or maybe they do, but not talked about, an induction motor has a spike in, call it amperage draw when it starts up, especially if there's pressure in the pump and whatnot. So, we wanted to deliver maximum power out of the induction motor, but we had to be very conscious of keeping it under 15 amp. There are a lot of people or a lot of products out there that kind of allow the product or induction motors to get very, very close or above 15 amp, especially at startup. And what that does is it trips a lot of breakers. If you have multiple products running on one, or you have older electrical in your home, you're gonna get a lot of trip breakers, and it's not gonna be a great experience. So we had to do a really kind of fine balancing act of getting the most power we could out of the induction motor, but keeping it below 15 amps because we didn't want it to trip breakers. And that just wouldn't be a good experience for people. But again, now this is a much bigger, much heavier motor, and that also drove some of the design decisions.
So when it comes to integration of the product, we looked again. What did we learn from the 2.0?
Right.
How are people using it? How are they likely to use this more powerful model? We knew this was going to go on the wall. That was going to be one place it had to live, right, on the wall. So the wall mount was integrated, and then we looked again at where the hose is plugging into, where's the electrical cord coming out of.
Right, so we certainly wanted to take the learnings from the 2.0. So whether it was the fittings, the location of the inlet outlet, making the switch accessible, and then integrate some of the kind of the new learnings. So as you said, how do we make it easy to mount on a wall, right? This thing being a lot bigger and heavier, do we still need a place for storage of things like nozzles and so forth? There was a lot of thinking into the design and how it ended up. And of course, last but not least would be the aesthetics of the unit.
One other key thing we knew from the start was some people, they're gonna wanna take it out of the cage and just mount it directly onto a shelf. So if they didn't want to use the wall mount, but they had a shelf in mind already, it had to be easy for the user to just kind of unbolt it, lift it out, and then rebolt it somewhere else. So we didn't have, a complicated housing that was supporting everything. It was really standing on its own 2 feet.
Right, and so that variability in terms of how a user is going to use and interact with the product, yeah, that was part of our design thinking at the beginning. I guess when you think about the way the 2.3 looks and the design of the 2.3, I think we had a really good opportunity to actually retool the housing of the motor.
Right. This actually came along, I recall, kind of further along the design process. We'd begun working with an off-the-shelf component and a revised 5-piston pump on the front. And I remember there was awkward marriage between those two components. And so to really get the most out of the pump, we realized we need to rework this motor. And so the housing kind of opened up as a piece that I could play with, which was...
And I think it's kind of neat, right? So you have this kind of echoing of the pump design that goes all the way into kind of the motor casing. And that's really was a great opportunity that was given to us because of all the work we were doing between the motor and the pump and making it serviceable and so forth. It's always a balance between function and design. And it's always great when, kind of like you said, those two come together and we're able to incorporate design and function at the same time.
That's right. And the fins that are on the 2.3, the existing motors, they all had fins on them.
Which are necessary for
cooling.
They're
necessary, yes. It's a cooling requirement for this style of motor. We actually were able to, when we decided to retool it, we said, well, we could put more fins. This would still help with cooling, increase the cooling. So we went ahead with that.
Right, yeah, I think it looks great. So let's take a look at some of the concepts, early concepts of the 2.3, and then you can kind of see the progression of how we got from there to where we are today.
Yeah, so I think again, we started with 3. We tried to do 3 concepts. So concept 1, this was still, I was trying to adapt that kind of performance feeling of the 2.0 and
obviously account for the much bigger motor.
The much bigger motor, that it was going to be an open frame.
Right.
We were looking at a lot of competitive products that were very stripped down.
Yep.
So this is something kind of on a sled. I think ultimately it looked very flimsy. There's something cool about it, but this was going to be very difficult. You could see if you were to lift it, it would flex right away.
Yeah.
And so it was pretty, but it was a bit of a, bit of a weak one. Concept 2, this was much more that like solid workhorse, nothing to it. You can see this one had the wall mount integrated into it. I think this concept was where we first decided to think about that.
Integrate the wall mounting.
Yeah, the wall mount kind of came about on this revision here. I feel like there you can see it on the wall. I don't think we'd really found this sort of the killer form factor that we were going for, that concept 2. But you can see this still had it had the first evolved pump.
Yep.
So this is the new induction motor,
Yep.
5-piston pump. So that's the first time that appeared. And then this was, again, kind of looking at concept 2, concept 1. This is a kind of a sled thing again with a simple housing on top, the nozzle storage here, very basic switches. Of course, this also had the wall mount. And this was one continuous pipe bent around. I know that there was some complications around, well, how are we going to finish that end like that? That's not very nice from a production point of view to ask someone to do that. But I think ultimately these didn't really inspire a lot of excitement.
Okay. And then we have concepts 4 to 6 next.
Sure. This was, we were kind of picking through the first 3 and seeing if we could sort of mush 2 of them together to if that could generate a bit of excitement. Because I think we felt like concept 1, it had the most visual interest, but it just lacked a lot functionally. These were sort of early iterations of what was possible. So this was still, this is 1, 2, so 4, 5, and 6. I think on this one, there was a simplicity to it that it was a little bit awkward, but it started to have, I don't know. I think we were starting to get a little bit closer to what we wanted in a design solution, but still a long way to go. This is an evolution of Concept 6, which was very traditional approach. If we were to put it on a cart, this is a much heavier unit. So if we knew that it was going to either go on a shelf or it was going to be sort of moved around, imagine a world where we had this on a cart and it was kind of wheeling around like a gas cart.
One of the concepts that keeps getting thrown about is the concept of a kind of a traditional gas-looking cart that this is. And the 2.3, or can we make a modular unit that can mount onto one of these carts? People ask us all the time, why don't our products have wheels? That's a common question. I think if you really use these products day to day, you're not really dragging a pressure washer around, or at least you shouldn't be. You know, don't forget, you always have a hose connecting the product. You always have an electrical cord connecting the product. You have a water outlet and hose. So it's not exactly the easiest product to drag around, but I understand if you're moving it in and out of the garage and it's heavy, some people will need the wheels or find it easier to move around.
One other thing that I just noticed here, 2.2.
Right.
So at this stage,
we're still testing and we
were only confident at 2.2.
Right.
So I remember we were gunning for 2.3, but even internally, we weren't confident to go beyond what was truly possible.
Right.
And now, so this would be now we're Concept 7.
Right.
This is starting to obviously
be
zero
very close
in
to where we ended up.
Yeah, and so we now have the cage. As you were saying before, there's a weight issue, the portability issue, and so we felt that to ask people to always lift this thing with one hand, that was a lot. So so we said, well, let's make it very accessible from the tool itself, the motor, the pump, the electricals. Easy to remove, but also easy to carry with two hands. Without doing anything, it's very easy to carry. As heavy as it is, this is kind of the next approach.
I think this is it.
This is pretty much it.
Yep.
We've gone from here. We don't have the nozzle storage. This is an early version of the electrical box.
Yeah. This also doesn't have the custom tool on the motor.
Yeah, this was the original motor that we had.
Right.
So as we did those refinements to the motor, that kind of unlocked the next bit of the design, which was creating this more unified solution and then evolving the electrical box, adding the nozzle storage. I remember there was a lot of adjustments here to the angle of this cage, what was optimal for carrying and still allowed for easy removal. And then, I don't know if we have a picture here, but the back plate had the wall mount integrated into it.
So I think where we arrived at the final design still kind of allowed us to kind of get to where we were trying to get to, which were kind of incorporating all the technical improvements of the product and kind of showcasing that with the brass pump head. And that's kind of a key visual material difference. I think the redesign of the motor, being able to align and kind of mirror the fins of the pump with the housing of the motor was a very cool thing. I think, as JC mentioned, because the unit is so heavy, allowing the user to carry it and pick it up with two hands, I think was a good usability and safety issue. And at the end of the day, still allowing the user, if they don't need the cage, to take the unit, take the core motor and pump out of the cage, and use that independently. So I think all of those design objectives were achieved, and that was kind of the thinking behind the product.
Absolutely. And it's the same thing that we started with on the 2.0, and it's continually evolving within our thought process. With everything we do, we're referencing you could call it like the opportunities or even the shortcomings in previous designs, especially through the feedback.
Right.
They're really guiding us forward on either whether it's an evolution of this design or an expansion in the product line.
Even though now the 2.3 I think has been out for about a year, and there have been obviously great feedback from our user base on some of the, what they like, what they don't like about the product. And we've had feedback anywhere from the weight of the product, the noise and how loud it is when it operated, and even just comments around how we mount it, whether the cage was necessary or not for some people. And then of course, there's always feedback on the accessories. So we certainly have heard and take note of all the feedback, and are always looking for solutions to help our customers. We always try to take time to explain kind of some of the decisions that we made. We know for sure that customers are always, a lot of them have their own accessories that they want to use the product with. There's always the constant question why we don't bundle it with better accessories or all the upgraded accessories. Not everybody wants a 100-foot hose or has space for it or finds it easy. Not everybody needs or wants a short gun, let's say. And certainly not everybody wants to spend more money for the product, which certainly would inflate the price of the product. So these are the things that we try to consider when selling the product and kind of designing where we think it should sit in the market. But we've received a ton of positive feedback on the 2.3 too. I think people love the performance of it. There's a noticeable improvement in performance. I think people love the idea that they can rebuild the product and keep the product for the long term. I think they're very happy with the feel and the quality of the product, especially when it's mounted in their setups. I think these are all positives that we look to build on as we keep refining the product and think about the next generation of Active 2.3 and 2.0 and all the next products coming.
So that's a wrap from us. As always, we want to thank everybody for all your feedback. It really helps me out, James out, everybody. So please like, subscribe, leave your comments below. If you see any comments you like, give them an up vote. If you don't like it, go ahead, do that. But it all really helps. It really does. So thanks. Have a good day.